I know I've been going on a lot about guidelines and that for writing fan fiction, but I thought I'd start focusing on some of the fandoms out there. And one that's really had an impact on me which was a series that was a part of the X-Men family of comics that Marvel put out, and that was a series called Generation X. Now, this comic, it came out basically when I was just starting college, and I actually avoided it at first because I had already heard that Marvel was doing an Age of Apocalypse storyline. And I'll admit, my first look at it, and when it came to the knowledge, was that this series was only going to last for 4 months. And I didn't really want to get into something like that. It wasn't until the made-for-TV movie happened on Fox that I started looking into it more. And that's in part of how I came to really get into it. But how it started was actually part of a storyline called the Phalanx Covenant, where a group of creatures in the Marvel Universe similar to the Borg had decided they were going to take on Earth. And they had specifically targeted certain young mutants that apparently might have power to defeat them, or really cause a threat. And that's how you got the beginnings of Generation X. The mutants that were captured by the Phalanx had been, let's see, I believe Monet, I believe Skin as well. It's been years since I read it. I think Husk was one as well. Clarice Ferguson, Blink. And I think there was another, but they're eluding me right now. Also targeted had been Jubilee and Everett Thomas, who's known as Sync. Had it not been for Sean Cassidy, who was at the X Mansion at the time the whole thing started, Emma Frost, who was recovering from a prior encounter with the X-Men, this was at the point where she decided to join the good side, and a detained Sabretooth, Generation X would not have happened. And this also shows one of the unique things about Sabretooth. Sabretooth would go to great lengths to keep Jubilee from harm, because he wanted the honor of killing her. He knew how much it would hurt Wolverine. Yeah. Weird, I know. Anyhow, Generation X, these fledgling members stopped one major nasty part of the Phalanx Covenant, in part due to the sacrifice of one person, and then the school was formed. And in the first issue we saw the debut of a villain that was, prior to that, only hinted at, that being Emplate, because Bishop would refer to, in his future timeline, having been cornered by a horde of Emplates, which is frightening now that we know what Emplate is, being a mutant vampire that feeds on mutant genetic marrow. We get introduced in that issue to Chamber, the first issue of Generation X, as well as several other characters. One of the most noteworthy, in my opinion, is Penance. She arrives on their doorstep at the beginning of the issue, or at the end of the issue. And from there, you began basically a 6.5-year run with a 4-month hiatus for the Age of Apocalypse. I mean, and Generation X proved their chops. They were, like I said, they were the junior grade of the X-Men, with veteran characters of Banshee, White Queen, and Jubilee being part of the mix. I mean, Jubilee had gone there to further learn about her powers, and in turn you see her start showing her tactical side. She shows a brilliant tactician. She shows caring for penance, and all the other characters, they sort of go through not only the typical "oh, we're off to save the world again" type thing that tends to be common, but also teenage drama, which, well, like I said, I was just in college at the time it came out, so I could relate to the issues. Teenagers could relate to the issues, and it was sort of like a coming of age for a lot of them. And they went through several adventures, several writers, which changed certain things. The long-term fans of Generation X still hate Larry Hama, I think. And these were characters that were very dynamic. Yes, some of their powers might seem, how could you use that in a fight, or what's the purpose of it? And the characters would evolve. Very few would kick the bucket. You would see the return of some other nasties, which included Black Tom Cassidy, and I think even Juggernaut showed up in one issue. I could be wrong. But it also allowed us to explore certain other characters into more detail. And you learned more about Jubilee's past, you learned more about Emma's past. Hell, it was through Generation X that we found out that Emma had sisters. And let's face it, her older sister Adrienne, who debuted in the series, she was worse than Emma. So, take that and think about that. It showed one of the more messed up families in the whole Marvel universe, that being the St. Croix family, because it was revealed that Monet St. Croix was the sister of the original M-Plate. And part of this was, I think, Larry Hama's doing, reworking the character Penance to be actually an imprisoned form of Monet, and then having Monet's twins, little sisters, take on her form, and then get trapped in the body, and then break out of the body, only to prove that the body is in itself a separate entity. It's messed up, and I would go into that more when I talk on Penance, because she was such a fascinating character, and that's really what drew me to what kept me linked into Generation X, because I wanted to see how her character evolved, even though they took her out of the series towards the end of its run. It's something to say of how the series progressed. Sadly, the series ended with the school closing, and then many misfortunes hit various characters. Before the series ended, Sync was killed. He died nobly, so I'm not overly upset with that. Several members of Generation X ended up in another storyline crucified on the X-Men's lawn. They managed to save Jubilee and Paige from death, but not Angela Espinosa, aka Scan. Somewhat shaky on that. Jonathan Starsmore, who was known as Chamber, he went through possibility of being an X-Men, then dating a Britney Spears wannabe, something like that. And then with the whole End Day scenario, he lost his powers, and then it was revealed he's actually a distant descendant of Apocalypse, and someone was able to use Apocalypse's blood to restore him to living being instead of a shell hooked up to machines. Let's see. Husk has gone through mental disorder, literally madness, possible relationship with Toad. Monet, she's having her own issues and all that, but she is now, she's about one of the more survived relatively intact. It may be flashbacks of what her time as Penance. Jubilation lost her powers, joined another group, I think Heroes for Hire or something like that, with a power suit, went by the name of Wondra, and then got vamped. And I think Sean Cassidy got his throat slit at one point. I don't know if he survived that one or if that killed him. I'm still vague on that one. Let's see, who else? Penance. She disappeared, apparently got put into imprisoned in a tube that was revealed in the Loners series of comics, where she was rescued and then fell, I guess got infatuated by Phil Ehrlich, who was one of the Green Goblins. I think one of the ones that managed to maybe stay more noble or something before the madness took him. She then later joined the Avengers Academy. But that pretty much covers all of them. I mean, Emma Frost, she remained with the X-Men, and eventually, I think she became one of Scott Summers' latest significant other, or a child. I think that's Hope Summers. But, you know, that's how these characters have evolved, and they were all captivating in their own way. And I feel honored to have followed that series from, well, maybe not so much from beginning to end, but I caught on and got every issue. And it's become a favorite of mine, and it still remains a favorite to this day, and this is well over 2 decades after its debut. So, you know, that's got to say something. And that shows that I was a true fan of the series, because fans stay fans that long. Fans stay fans for life if it's truly something they loved. I suppose that's all I really can say on Generation X. I mean, look at all. If you can really go anywhere and find Generation X fandom. Sometimes you have to look a little for it, but it's out there. In fact, one of the early fan sites, when the internet was still in its infancy, there was actually a pure Generation X fan fiction website, and there were a few Generation X fan sites. So there's still a few things that float about, you know, developed just for the characters of Generation X. But given how it spoke to that generation, I'm like the last end of Generation X. It is saying something. It spoke to Generation X, Generation, I guess, Y, and maybe some millennials actually look at it too. Anyhow, now you know part of why I write some of my stuff. I'll try and cover some more fandoms in future things, as well as give more advice. But I hope you enjoy listening to this. And like I said, always subscribe if you truly are interested in my stuff and want to hear my point of view. Take care.